So I'm going to chat in the next 10 or 15 minutes about How to Rig an Election, the book that I've written with my co-author, Professor Nick Cheeseman. And if I could get the presentation on the screens, please. So one of the things that's a problem about the modern world today is that, democracy is under threat just about everywhere. There's a democratic recession taking grip across the entire globe. And one of the first times that I encountered this or started thinking about this was in 2015 when I interviewed this man, Nikolai Statkevich, in Belarus. And he was a man who was running for president of Belarus, a country that's known as the last dictatorship in Europe. And for that crime of running for president, he was kidnapped, abducted, and thrown into a van, beaten nearly to death, and put into solitary confinement in Belarus. And shortly after he was released from prison in late 2015, I met him in Minsk in Belarus. And we met in a little cafe, and we were both being trailed by the KGB, the intelligence services of the time, him, the presidential candidate, me, the person who writes for the Washington Post and was writing about him. And we talked about democracy, and the thing that he said to me, the 7 words he left me with, I'll never forget, which are, "You don't realize how lucky you are." And what he meant was living in a democracy is an enormous privilege. It's an enormous privilege that I'm thankful to say we have in India here with the largest democracy in the world, and also that we have in many countries in the West, in the UK where I live or in the US where I was born. But that's not enough, right? It's not enough to just be born with the privilege of democracy. It's something you have to constantly fight for. And that's something that's under threat across the globe. So I want you to think about democracy like a sandcastle. And if you want to have a sort of cheap-looking, easy sandcastle, all you need to do is hold an election. It's pretty quick. It happens. Most countries, including authoritarian countries, hold elections these days. But it takes a much longer time if you want to move from that sandcastle to this sandcastle. The perfect sandcastle, the perfect democracy, takes decades to build, decades to perfect. But the problem is, much like a sandcastle, if you let it happen, it can be washed away, right? Sometimes with one big wave, a coup or a civil war or a revolution, and sometimes, more often today, with small waves, lapping at each grain of sand, taking it away slowly until you no longer have a democracy, you have a lumpy authoritarian mess, as we see in the photo. And so that's why, one of the paradoxes of the world we live in today, the paradoxes that starts this book, is that there are more elections than ever before in the world. That's great news, right? More elections than ever before in human history. And yet, the world is becoming less democratic. And that's been true since 2006, where every year, despite the fact that we have this rise in national elections per year, steadily increasing, we also have a decrease in democracy. So the red here are the number of countries that are becoming more authoritarian year after year, and the blue is every country that's becoming more democratic. And you can see the depressing picture is that the red, especially as we approach 2019, is much, much bigger than the blue. And that's a trend, as I say, that's held true for about 12 years.